really enjoyed themselves. So those who did, thank you very much. There's a lot of hard work, and you never know what the outcome of an event that's new and a little scary could be. So thank you guys for all of your positive feedback yesterday. So today what I want to talk to you about is a topic that I actually don't present too often, and this is a brand new presentation for me. So if there's typos in there, point them out to me later so I can correct them. Well, this is the first time I'm going to do this presentation, actually. And this isn't really the title, because the topic is actually what wavelengths of LED illumination are ideally used, and how can you use them to your benefit. So, but I put up a statement that I think is really the truest thing of everything that we do in machine vision. Contrast is the ultimate goal. So I'm going to talk a little bit about contrast. Talk a lot about light. I'm going to talk a lot, and then I'm going to move into how the different wavelengths can be manipulated to get to that really good contrast. Because really, what we want to see in machine vision is we want to highlight things we want to see and eliminate things that we don't. So, first, let's talk about light. What is light? That's why we're all here. It's what we haven't even talked about yet. Day 2, we're not even going to talk about it. What is light? So I went to Google and I cut-paste a couple of definitions. I think this is going to create a good foundation because there's a lot of ways light can be interpreted. So light, the natural agent that stimulates sight and makes things visible. Understanding of a problem or mystery. Enlightenment. That actually kind of applies to machine vision, right? An area of something that is brighter or paler than its surroundings. Now that's kind of the ultimate goal, right? That's what we're looking for in machine. Now let's talk about a little bit more about what is light, because there's also a scientific, beyond the definition, there's a scientific explanation for what light is. And it's actually deep, deep well. So, light is a form of energy produced by matter. In this case, the purest form of light that we know as human beings is the sun. So heavenly bodies are the ultimate producers of light. They're the natural producers of light. Everything else is artificial man-made. It is a visible portion of streaming photons which make up the electromagnetic spectrum. So I'm actually not a big fan of streaming photons. I think a better explanation of what these photons are doing is they're vibrating. And we quantify them by a wavelength. So what this is really, this is a photon vibrating. It's moving up and down. And we quantify it by wavelength. So there's peaks and there's valleys. And out of all the different wavelengths that are being produced by the heavenly body we call the sun, we can see an extremely, extremely small portion of those light signals, of that vibrating photon. A very small space. But we do use some others for some other things. We've come a long way as human beings. So this electromagnetic spectrum of vibrating photons, we use them to cook food. We use them to listen to rock music. We look at our bones with some of these wavelengths. And we produce energy with some of them as well. And we avoid some of them as well too because they're harmful to us. To go even farther, different organisms on the planet can see different portions more than others. And we'll go into that in a minute. Now let's talk about our eye. Let's talk about what we interpret this sunlight as. But actually not, there's one thing I wanted to mention in a previous slide I didn't. Bob Steinke talked a lot about God yesterday. And a lot of people have different interpretations of what God is, what God might be, because we really don't know. We go off of some evidence we have, we formulate what we think that result is. A lot of people will say that nothing would exist if it weren't for God. But if you think about light, nothing could exist if light were present. If you think about it. If the sun didn't exist, life on planet Earth wouldn't exist either. So what is God? Is God a form of cosmic energy that's produced by heavenly bodies to create life? It's kind of just a good question. But let's talk about what we can see in this realm of light. The human eye actually has a peak sensitivity. We've developed that over years based on our environments. If you see here, the human eye's peak sensitivity is kind of debated, but it's best to settle on a range because everybody is different and every body is different, every eye is different. So we've got a range of about 550 nanometers through 565, and that's actually in a greenish yellow spectrum. And our environment has a lot to do with that. The last time you looked outside in the summer, there's a lot of green out there. Well, a long time ago, in prehistoric eras, and pre-prehistoric eras, a lot of plant life wasn't green, to be honest. If you do a little Googling, a lot of plant life was actually blue. The planets changed colors over many millennia. And today we've settled upon a yellowish green because there's a lot of that in nature. And before we were driving cars and we spent most of our time indoors, human beings were in nature a whole lot. So with that being said, let's talk about cameras. Now, the human eye can see in this specific wavelength range. It stops at about, let me back up. It stops at about near IR, so we're looking at 700, 750 nanometers. And it stops at about 300-ish in the ultraviolet spectrum. But there's a lot of other beings on this earth that can see in different realms. For example, snakes. Snakes have to see their prey during the day and especially at night. Believe it or not, they have eyes and they can see in the visible, okay? But they actually have receptors in between their eyes. A real good example is a rattlesnake. They can see in infrared. So when they see a mouse at night, they see a completely different spectrum than we do, so that they can find their prey. They've adapted to do this. Most insects, especially, I'll use the example of butterflies. Butterflies don't see very well in higher frequency wavelengths, but they see a ton of ultraviolet illumination. So when a butterfly looks at a flower, that flower looks massively different from what we see. There's actually a different beauty. If you guys ever have some time to stumble upon some Google images, keyword search, what an insect sees, what a bee sees, what a butterfly sees. And you'll see some side-by-side comparisons of very, very common flowers that look nothing like what we see. So light's interesting. It's a very interesting topic. Now let's talk about cameras, man-made device that's meant to be better than the human eye. And it is. You can see that we are, well, let me back up. This is actually a Stingray Manic camera from Allied Vision Technologies. Now, Alex talked about CMOS sensors kind of being the new go-to. A lot of cameras are using CMOS, but for a long time, this Sony sensor is a CCD model. It was used in a very, very wide array of cameras, not only the Stingray Manta, but I'm sure some others, or at least just some small, slight differentiation of this Sony CCD design. And what's important to know about this camera is not only can it see in a much, much larger range of illumination and wavelength, even in that's not a complete graph. You can blame Allied Vision, where I pasted this from the website. But it does go well into the ultraviolet, much farther, much bigger range than we can. So, also it has a peak sensitivity that actually is just above 500 nanometers. What that is basically, that puts it into what we call cyan. So if you guys are familiar with the color cyan. That would be the peak sensitivity for this camera. And it's important to think of peak sensitivities because sometimes that can be used to your advantage in the system. If there's not an opportunity to create contrast by using some things like opposing colors, then sometimes it's a good idea to think of what the peak sensitivity of that camera is. Especially when you get a larger working distance, because you're maximizing the efficiency of the light you're using in the system if you're using something that knows or likes that wavelength a lot. So let's talk about contrast really quick, because I had that in the title. It was on the first slide. Let's read the contrast definition that Mr. Google tells us. the state of being strikingly different from something else, typically something in juxtaposition or close association. I didn't know what juxtaposition meant when I put this together, so I looked it up. So I might be tipping my hat at my vocabulary range a bit here, but I don't have that much pride. But so those who don't know what juxtaposition is, it's the act of two things being seen or placed close together with contrasting effect. And I think that image shows a really good representation. Back to contrast. The degree of difference between tones in a television, picture, photograph, or other image. That is what we do. Maybe not in television so much, but definitely in photograph and other images. Enhance the apparent brightness or clarity of a design provided by the juxtaposition of different colors and textures. Well, the action of calling attention to notable differences. That's my favorite part of this for machine vision, and the reason why is because that's what we want to do. That's what, if that barcode is something we want to read, we want to call notable attention to that and make a difference with everything else, so it just sticks out, jumps out. Makes that camera programming of that software simple. That's what proper lighting can do. So what is contrast? Now you'll see I've got little yin-yang right here. I think actually that the yin-yang is probably the best and purest and simplest visual representation of contrast. Not only does it represent good, it represents evil, but it's also black and white, integrated, and kind of a nice little simple diagram. So I think it's a good theme to talk about contrast. So contrast is also the scale of the difference between black and white. So what I've got two images here. So if there were no contrast, something would either be all white or all black. There'd be no differentiation in that. And there would be no image. I've got two examples here. Believe it or not, there are people in this environment with this image. That is not some image that someone took and manipulated to kind of create a flatter area. That's smog in Beijing. It's a real image. You can see there's not a lot of contrast in that image. Now that we know it's smog, but A, it's not a healthy image. B, we know it's not a healthy environment either. But by looking at opposing colors, we see red and we see a light blue nearby. It's crystal clear, it jumps out. There's a big, big difference between the chairs and the table. And it's very noticeable and it's very ideal to recreate that kind of difference in contrast for vision and image. So I'll get into a couple diagrams. These are really, really simple explanations. So why is an object white? Why is an object red? Why is an object black? Well, a white object actually, and let's take it back one more step. The sun is a culmination of white illumination. You hold a prism up to the sun. That prism splits all of the colors that are composed within white light into their specific wavelengths so you can see them visibly. Like a rainbow, for example. A white object, like my shirt today, it's reflecting all of the white light right back out into space. And our eyes perceive it as white. Marco's jacket in the front row, wearing a black jacket today. His jacket is taking all this light and it's actually absorbing all of it and reflecting on it. We perceive that as black. It's blue. It's mostly absorbing all of the light and reflecting deep blue. Joe Pisto, black shirt. Joe Pisto, Rachel, that's black. That's absorbing. Now, Tom Parrish is wearing a red shirt today. So what his shirt is actually doing is absorbing all of the other colors of the rainbow, and it's reflecting red, and we perceive that as red because it's reflecting back a red wave. So on and so forth for all colors of the rainbow, et cetera, et cetera. So let's talk about colors, because that's what we perceive life as. It's a differentiation of many colors, and then emotions, and then feelings, and smells, and all that stuff. Let's talk about colors. We have primary colors, which a lot of people think green's a primary color. I did for a long time, but actually yellow is a primary color. It's yellow, blue, and red. there's also opposing colors. So if we look at this color wheel, and you guys have probably seen this example many times, but I'll give you my explanation. So opposing colors is a way to darken a feature. So let's say I have a blue light, and the opposing color for blue is actually orange. If I have a blue light and I shine it on something orange, that something orange to a monochrome black and white camera will be reflected very, very dark. Now if I have a orange object and I shine a blue light on that orange object, I'm sorry, hold on, let me back that up. It's been a while since I've explained this color. So if we have a blue object and I shine a blue light on that blue object, that blue object will be perceived by a monochrome camera very bright. So it's a good way to create contrast. And I've got an actual good example of a good way to create contrast coming up shortly. But keep in mind, an orange wavelength is not common. It's about 590 nanometer. We call it amber in our world at Smart Vision Lights. And we do that on an occasional request. But keep in mind, this isn't something where everything needs to be exactly opposing. It's nice that we have green LEDs that are very common. We have red, so we can use that to our advantage often. Orange is a little bit less common. So keep in mind that you can look at this color wheel also, and this is something that no one's ever really explained to me. I just interpreted it on my own. You can segment this section of the color wheel. So you can group up your oranges and reds, and as long as you are using something in juxtaposition or an opposite, you're going to get that darkening feature by using opposing colors. It doesn't have to be perfectly opposing. We can move one section here from one section here on a blue object, and we are still going to get a lot of contrast. So keep that in mind. This is M&M example of opposing colors. Let's say we're using that 590 light. We've got an orange light. And this is what our eye sees, color version of what this imaging of the, and what the camera sees as imaging of assortment of the whole pack of M&Ms on the table. You can see right here, we've got a blue M&M. With an orange light, that blue M&M is extremely black. So we've used an opposing color to darken very successfully blue M&M. And if you look at the rest of the colors, this is a really good example. You don't have to be perfectly opposite wavelengths. We've got orange, and we've got a green M&M here. Well, as you can see, orange is not perfectly opposite, pretty close. You've got very, very dark green M&M as well. So that's a good example. They don't have to be perfectly opposed, but you kind of group these segments around color. Segment, segment, segment. Look at it in 4 seconds. Now, we're going to change the light. Instead of an orange light, we're going to see what a blue light looks like. As you see, even the table gets a bit darker because it actually has an orangish tan tint to it. But all the M&Ms, they sure change. Flip back a couple of times. Pick an M&M, pick a green one, pick a blue one, whatever color you want to look at. Flip back and forth. So by using opposing wavelengths, we can highlight and we can darken features. That's really what I want you guys to take away from most of this kind of one-on-one. Most of you guys know that one. Andy has it. Knows it very well. But for those who don't, it's good to go over. It's really the ultimate goal is to create contrast. So this is a good example of creating contrast, and this is actually an everyday application. We're not sorting candy like it's a trade show display, a machine that's running and sorting. But this is a real world application. So the goal of this application is we've got a circuit board with a green background. We've got components on it. One of those components needed an adhesive sticky pad that was white on top of one of the microprocessors. And they had to be straight and they had to be on top of every single microprocessor. So what we have here is a couple of images. Now what light is being used in this application, I'm going to ask you guys. You guys are probably going to know the answers. Everybody knows their vision pretty good and their lighting pretty good in this room. But we've got a green background, we've got some highly reflective pads in it. Actually white. White light reflects a lot of light. Well, or a white object reflects a lot of light back. Doesn't matter. It's going to reflect back that same wavelength of light. So, in this case, we've got location here, they're kind of missing. This is a fully complete, perfect made product. It's got the pads in all 7 locations. The measurement of those doesn't show any skewing, they're straight, they meet the spec what this customer wants to do. You see we've got slots 1, 2, 3, and 4. They're all failing because guess what? That black chip is absorbing all the light, it's not reflecting anything back. And since we're using an opposing color, background is black as well, it's very dark. So anybody want to shout out what color LED made this happen? Red. Absolutely. Absolutely. Red darkened it. Now if we put a green light on this, you'd still get reflection from these pads. This would still come back green. But guess what? Your contrast between the backgrounds, since it's a green object, it's all going to get bright. Contrast is the ultimate goal of machine vision. Gold not achieved. So let's talk about ultraviolet. You know, bugs see it pretty good. So ultraviolet reflection and absorption. In our world of machine vision, most ultraviolet applications are, you don't want to see ultraviolet. Well, you want to, what you're shining the ultraviolet on, you want to see what it's bringing back to you. In our world, a lot of these ultraviolet applications actually have, they reflect back to us in a blue wavelength. That is by far and away the most common wavelength. So what I have as an example here, UV light out in space, this is purple light, or this is purple emitting from it. And what you'll see is, if you're reading like an ink that has a UV additive, that's one of the most common UV applications, whether it's a barcode or lock code. You'll shine that ultraviolet light on that material that excites under ultraviolet light, and it's going to reflect back the color to you. I would say 7 times out of 10 it's going to be blue, but it's good to look at that. So in this case, we have an imaginary product with a lock code on it, we're shining UV, it's going to reflect blue light back off of it into the camera. As you can see in the application example here, we've got a Visine bottle. We've got a couple of applications of different inks in play. There's a lot of adhesives that have ultraviolet additives to them as well, so you can see the adhesive. I've seen applications where there's cleansers. A customer of mine was actually, they had the inside of door skin for an automotive vehicle, and to make sure that there was no bird, no leftover contaminants from the metalling process, they actually applied an adhesive to it. And there was an additive for UV, so once that adhesive dried, there was some leftover reflective properties. If you shine UV on it, you know that that door was clean properly. Those are some examples of what we do in machine vision. So, but mostly it's an additive that makes it happen. And a lot of manufacturers, when you guys are doing UV applications, where do you start? Well, the thing that I tell most customers when they have UV applications, that either that additive, those specifications exist in the world. And you can find those. All you have to do is ask. Yeah, it's another email and a couple of maybe phone calls and a little waiting. It might even be a day or 2 before you find out. But they can, those manufacturers of those additives, inks, you name it, they have a maximum excitation wavelength, which means if you shine 365 nanometer UV on this, you're going to get the brightest reflection back off of this material. You shine 395 on this light, on this object, and this ink, and this additive, it's going to shine back much brighter. So that way, you don't have to do the guesswork, it's there. So, because if you don't know that information, then you have to test, which means one wavelength light and another wavelength light. Who wins? That's how you win. But if you get that information ahead of time, it makes life really, really easy. That's one less thing that saves yourself a lot of work on your time. So I mentioned that a lot of these UV additives and inks and stuff that exist in our world, they reflect back blue. You can see that in all these images right here. There's a purplish tone to them too. But also sometimes we can get yellow back, cyan, purple back, and in some rare cases green. As you see, this is a caterpillar.
and you're shining UV light on this caterpillar, and look at all the wavelengths it's bouncing back. It's not, if you're using it, let's use one example. Let's say we're using a 365 nanometer UV light, we're shining it on this caterpillar. Give him a nice little suntan. Give him a little vitamin D, if caterpillars do that like humans. So we're going to shine a UV light on this thing, and what you're seeing in this image is not 365 nanometer ultraviolet light. You're seeing wavelengths in the color spectrum that we can interpret, we can see well with our eyes. So you see yellows, greens, blues, purples. Beautiful picture, actually. A couple of recommendations about UV before I go on to the next slide about infrared illumination. UV illumination, there's some recommendations smart vision lights always makes. We all know some of the harmful possibilities of ultraviolet light. One thing you guys might not know is that actually UV LEDs aren't nearly as efficient as a white or a blue LED. So we put power and current into an LED, and we get X value of intensity on it. If we do that with white, we get X value of intensity on it, and that is a much greater source of energy than UV LEDs. They're just not that efficient. So a good way to maximize efficiency is to pulse them beyond their continuous operations and overdrive them. We always recommend strobe ultraviolet sources when possible. Possible is a judgment thing, right, for the user and the system. But we really recommend you exhaust all opportunity to use overdriven light to maximize intensity, expand the life of those LEDs as long as possible, create a safe environment for everyone nearby. We also recommend filtering. Camera filter that's going to block all other ambient light. Let's just say we're looking at this Visine cap. We know that's blue light. Let's use a bandpass filter that's going to block out all wavelengths above and below 470 nanometers, because that is going to help increase contrast. And I found over time that, and we've got some examples on our website. If you go to our knowledge base, there's some UV articles and some good tips and tricks on ultraviolet. And from some examples that you can see there, you can really see what filtering can help achieve, give you a lot more contrast. So infrared's another kind of grouping. You know, there's visible, there's ultraviolet, and there's infrared. As humans, we classify them almost as groups, whether we know it or not. There's a lot of mystery around IR, right? You can't see it. To be honest with you, if you look at, we do IEC 62471 testing. What that is, it's a scope that was established with the European Union to measure the safety levels of LED engines, right? LED illumination. And when you do the testing on all the wavelengths, Matt mentioned yesterday, if you guys don't recall, that some of the more dangerous wavelengths to the human eye are actually blues and whites. When you do some of that testing, and you look at the results, which are on the bottom of all our product data sheets, you'll find that IR is one of the safer wavelengths. So please, I always stress people, don't carry stigma with IR. It's got a lot of benefits. It behaves a little bit differently than other wavelengths, and it's just as safe as a red piece of illumination. So let's talk about IR. So we got an IR light source. We're going down at an object. Objects either absorb or reflect. One other thing I didn't mention in the previous slide for visible is objects also transmit, so they pass the light through as well. In machine vision, with visible wavelengths, using that to your advantage with like a red light isn't as common, but it can be very, very common with IR, and it's something you should consider as a tool in your toolbox. So we're either reflecting, absorbing, or we're transmitting, which means we're passing through IR illumination. Now I want to hit a pause there. All right. This is my favorite part of the presentation. I'm going to grandstand. So I'm standing behind this. I want to grandstand. Let's talk about candy canes for a moment, guys. Not the right time of year, I know, but when is, right? Maybe Christmas time. Let's talk about candy canes. Things have gotten out of control, people. They've gotten out of control. I know when I was a kid, candy canes were one flavor. They're peppermint. And they were two colors. Red and white. Red and white. Bacon flavored candy cane? We love bacon, right? Should a candy cane taste like it? No. No, it should not. Pickles. I love pickles. I love them. Should a candy cane taste like it? No. Gravy. Probably the worst example of humanity gone wrong. The gravy flavored candy cane. So, with all these different candy canes, it actually creates a lot of variables for machine vision, right? A lot of different colors. Candy canes can be any color now, any combination of multiple colors. Minus taste, right? We don't talk about taste anymore. That's over. So this actually is a good example of how IR can give you some really, really good advantages in an application that's a little bit challenging at face value. So a box of candy canes, when you buy them in the store, they're wrapped in cellophane. There's a dozen of them spread across the box, and each individual candy cane is wrapped in cellophane. Reflective materials, right? So illumination can't pass through them, but it's going to reflect a lot back. It's really not going to absorb much of anything. So in this application, not only did they have the variables of all the different colors of the individual candy canes, they had these reflective properties of the channel. The whole outer carton is actually wrapped in reflective cellophane, which was the biggest challenge, really. So IR does a couple of things. It's reflected, absorbed, and transmits a little bit differently than some visible wavelengths. Also, one other thing, my explanation for what IR can do as well is, I should maybe soften this statement, but I think it's a little upfront, but it's true. It creates a kind of a dumbed down grayscale effect of your imaging. So all those different contrasting colors, it's going to kind of simplify them and kind of dumb down into the contrast, right? Sometimes that can be good, because what do we want to do in vision? What's the ultimate goal? And how do you do that? You do that by making something pale and something dark, or something pale and something bright. Basically, you want to highlight, you want to low light specific areas. So what IR can do is it's absorbed differently and transmits differently. So in this application, we've got a setup where we've got a camera looking at 0 degrees, and we've got an L300 850 light producing 850 nanometer illumination, shining and bouncing off in space. So what's happening is any reflective properties of that plastic are either going to bounce off into space, not directly in the camera, or they're going to transmit right through that, burn right through that outer plastic. See, plastics and organic materials, they behave differently under IR. Much different. And as you can see, you know there can be Smarties, kind of like pastel, little tiny dot candy, sugar. Lots of colors, right? Well, these candy canes are the same colors as all the rainbows and all the variation within a pack of Smarties. And as you can see, very, very white. You don't see that color. We've eliminated a lot of that color, made it extremely pale. And if you're looking to make sure that all of these candy canes are loaded up in this carton, got a lot of contrast at that hole going. A lot of it. So not only do we pass through reflective materials of the individual candy cane wrappings, the outer carton, but we've also eliminated that color differentiation as a variable that could make this machine vision application much more complicated. So as you can see, this became very, very easy with the use of a wavelength, IR. So I talked about organic materials too. Matt did this application actually a long, long time ago, and it's actually one of the cooler ones that I think I've seen in this product. So there's a blueberry packaging company, a growing company. They were into blueberries, right? They did blueberries. So the blueberries, they wanted to do a couple of things. They wanted to check ripeness. They had a long list, right? Don't ask too much in your machine vision system, unless you got Matt Pinner spending a lot of time on it, because he thought outside the box, right? You see that when I'm done going through this. So not only did they want to check brightness, and who knows about blueberries? What color is a very bright blueberry? Very, very dark blue. Purple is the bitter, unripe berry, and they don't want to package a carton 50% of those, right? They might not. Consumer might not buy that brand if that happens. They also wanted to make sure there were no stems, no leaves that were going down the system before these things were packaged and sort those. And then lastly, this guy, Japanese beetle. They could, unfortunately, Japanese beetles at this farm, they like blueberries. They like the blueberry plants. That was part of their ecosystem. They lived in that environment. No one wants them to live in their blueberry package environment dead when you open up the carton and you take it home. Another reason why you would buy that brand. So, we also had to sort, Matt also had to sort through who the beetles were and who the blueberries were. Now, one thing, IR energy is absorbed, transmitted, and reflected differently on different objects. It's organic material. Now, what a lot of places, one big source of energy for beetles is actually the sun. So, chlorophyll actually absorbs the sun. Plants, a whole lot of chlorophyll. Chlorophyll's good for you. It's healthy. You eat your greens, you get a lot of it. It helps build your blood. So, the beetles, they don't contain any chlorophyll. And actually, they absorb the sun a bit. They actually, there's a misstatement on there, and I'm reading this. Matt, you got to clarify. Where is he? So, I think beetles do contain chlorophyll because they do absorb it. Because when you shine IR illumination on these beetles, they get active, they move around. On a sunny day, they're active. Not like bees are. That's why they hibernate in the winter. But, so, they move around, they get excited, they absorb it. And by utilizing infrared illumination and playing with the exposure level, Matt was actually able to sort through the beetles and the blueberries. In that last image, all you saw were the beetles. Because they were absorbing that energy, they got very, very dark. And the blueberries transmits a lot more. Everything transmits to a certain level. Everything absorbs, everything reflects a bit. Small, minute, and through his exposure level and the intensity of the illumination, he's actually able to sort through those and differentiate a beetle from a blueberry. Also, as you can see here, he had to take a couple images. As you can see, there's going to be a white LED illumination. If you look at the white light, you can actually see a slight variation in brightness. There's some certain dark blueberries, there's some certain light blueberries. So this one, Matt really thought outside of the box. He was able to get good contrast with beetles, blueberries, brightness, and unfortunately in this example he didn't have any sticks and stems in this one. So IR can be used in organic materials as well. It behaves and it's absorbed a little bit differently than some of the other liquids. Last thing about IR, and this is the last example I have today. I've had a lot of customers in the past, and they want outdoor illumination. They have an outdoor vision application. And as vision grows, automation grows, more people are going to want to use these in different environments. And the outdoor environment is still different. So how do you give proper illumination in an outdoor setting? Trust me, we've tried and failed many, many times. But we've got some recent success because we finally learned how to do it. We finally have the tools to be able to help you guys. So this company actually wanted to do outer diameter measurements of logs. This is a lumber company. So when they get an order from the sawmill, who's going to cut boards out of all these logs, they need to know how much material they're giving them so they can promise how many boards this company can cut. They normally did it by taking a manual measurement, documenting it, and let's be honest, it's a slow process because you know who had to do that? The guy picking them up too, jumping in and out. Way too much. So that slowed down production and they had to be competitive. So they wanted an automated system to be able to measure the diameter of logs because the length is a constant. They're all cut the length at the same dimension. In this case, if you want to pick a fight with the sun in vision and you want to win that fight and you want to be successful, you need a lot of light. because as Dave mentioned yesterday, ambient illumination needs to be overpowered. If you shut off your vision illumination and your image goes dark, or I'm sorry, stays the same, your light's not effective. So we have to be extremely effective. What we have is an XR256 strobe camera. Anybody heard of this light before? Pretty colorful name. Very, very powerful light. Overdriven light. The brightest light in the SVLRs. A lot of uses. Not only is it good for high speed because it's a lot of light in a very short period of time, but if you have a spotlight application, you get a big field of view. We've got different lens options. We can spread that illumination. It's going to be a lot at a big working distance. And if anybody's going to be bothered by a bright flashing light, IR. So in this case, they focus the light in a tight 20-degree spread illumination at a 1 meter working distance from the face of the log. So what they did was, it was pretty cool. They housed everything and attached it right to the loader. It's all permanent installed. There's a PC inside the loader doing all the image storing. They dump that information at the end of the day into the central computer system off the rig, and now they have all that data. But what they had to do was put a complete vision system housed. So when that guy picked up a log or a cord of wood, he'd present it to the camera for a brief second. He had a trigger button in his cab. Once it was presented properly, he hit the trigger. Now he went and he put that in the next pile for the load that's going to go out on Company XYZ's delivery truck. So he didn't have to jump in and out. This company stayed competitive. The loading process was very, very fast at that point. And you can see we've got an image here. A lot of infrared illumination reflecting off that log. Look at that contrast, right? Look at that. That's a thing of beauty. And they were able to get consistent, accurate measurements, save a ton of time. And one last note, the reason why we picked infrared illumination, if you look at the broad spectrum of the sun, you have to pick which arena you want to fight the sun within. And the sun is more powerful in certain arenas. 850 nanometer near IR is not one of its strong suits. Not its strongest suit at all. That's not home field advantage at all for the sun. So the sun, we find you got to use a filter. You block out all it. The filter's key. Filters key. And we really say every application you're doing in vision can really benefit from filters. They're low cost, they're easy, and they can make programming and software much simpler. And eliminate a lot of challenges. So we block out everything that the sun is producing, and we choose to battle in the arena 850 nanometer. We emit so much light that we've got now enough strength to finally overcome it. And you can see from that beautiful image that we're successful. So that's a good way to do outdoor imaging. You need a lot of horsepower, you need a lot of light, you need a lot of power supply, and you need to be smart about it. You need to consider infrared illumination, strobing, and definitely filtering. Any questions on illumination or any of the applications? Yeah.
In our experience with some of the common imaging chips out there, like we do a lot of Cognix cameras, they respond pretty poorly in the IR range. So we have to increase exposure time quite a bit to get the contrast we want, but then we run into the motion blur issues. Any experience, recommendations on that front?
The first thing to consider is a lot of cameras, they have the option to be ordered with or without, or sometimes they just always put an IR filter on top of the CCD. So if you actually have access to that, there's some camera manufacturers that you need to order the camera with the IR filter or without. Definitely check that. But also sometimes, I don't know if Cognix does it, the Cognix guys here can probably tell you if it's just an insensitivity area for that CCD, or if there's any small filter added to that. Because like we can add vision camera filters for select bandpass and then long pass, so we can pass through, like let's say we've got a blue long pass filter, like 470 long pass. It's going to pass everything above 470 and block everything below that. There's a good chance that there might be a long pass IR filter that's on there. And it's a small film, and sometimes you can do a little surgery and get a pair of tweezers and finally remove that filter. But the Cognix guys can probably answer that question a bit more as to why that is. because most cameras have an extremely wide spectrum, they can easily handle IR. They don't have to be an IR specific camera. Those are out there in the market, and there's a lot of companies offering more of those, but most cameras have pretty wide field of spectrum sensitivity. But, yes, definitely.
Just a comment to add that the 7000 series tends to be more sensitive to IR than the 5000 micros.
Thanks. Anybody else have any questions? All right, guys, thank you.